Dave Sky here, Norfolk DNA. We haven't did a podcast in quite a bit on this station. We've been really busy, but I'm really happy to welcome in a good friend, Barb Anstead. Barb, how are you today?
I'm great, Dave. How are
Good. And
you?
the subject you do every month in the Hub for me, you do a beautiful column for Dover Apothecary, and I really appreciate all the great stuff I've learned. But you kind of caught me off guard this month, and one of the subjects you talk about is anorexia. And you talk about yourself having that battle early on in life. And I was just, I've seen how much you help people. I know how much you care about them eating properly and really making their body as healthy as possible. So then I kind of went, this is where all this started and where it comes from. And this was really, you were young in your life when all this sort of came about, were you not?
I was actually very much so. And, it's always an emotional and a difficult and very introspective journey for people to kind of express what it is that led them to those sort of behaviors. And it's much more common than we think, unfortunately. But I think because of my experiences that it's only added to my ability to consult with other people and really understand where they're coming from. And, oftentimes I'll have suspicions that that's sort of an underlying problem for something else. But I really feel like I was one of the lucky ones because I did have medical intervention at one point, which we'll get to that as we go along. But I was definitely one of the lucky ones to literally get out alive.
And this started, I don't want to date your age here because, we don't like giving out our age on my podcast, do we? But you were, this is probably what, the 70s, late 70s? Like when was this happening to you?
So it would have been, probably mid to late
And it just
70s.
wasn't really
Would
known
be
then, was it?
when, no, no, absolutely not. And it was something that my parents were kind of blindsided when the doctor identified that that was what was going on in the hospital. And it was kind of a very interesting conundrum of things that came along because that summer I had gone on a 4-H exchange trip out to Wawota, Saskatchewan, of all
Wrote
places, and stayed with a farming family out there. And when I came home from there, I actually had developed viral meningitis. And I ended up with mono, and I had gone out there already struggling with anorexia and bulimia. And so I ended up in the hospital for 3 full weeks. I was blind for 2 weeks because of the swelling on my brain. But when I was well enough, there was a young male intern that put me in a wheelchair and he took me to another hospital patient's room. And this was a young woman that was probably about the same age as me, and she was dying. This was her fifth time that she was in the hospital and they weren't able to save her. And he scared the living daylights out of me, Dave. He really did. But he gave it to me straight. He said, you have not messed your body up to the point where you're in her situation. But he said, you may have compromised your ability to ever have children and da 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 da. And I was just like, wait, what? I'm fat. That's all. I'm not like her. I'm fat and I'm just trying to lose weight. But in the back of my head, it all made sense that this wasn't just about trying to gain some control over some very painful situations in my life. This was actually me hurting my body. And he's the first one that identified
How old are
that.
you at this time and what was your weight? Just curious.
I was 16 at this point in time, and those behaviors probably started when I was around 14 years of age. Um, I'm not going to go into, big details or anything like that at this point, but oftentimes we see this in young people where there has been something traumatic happening in their life that damages their developing psyche before they're six
Okay.
years of age. Okay, so in my family, there's a lot of alcoholism and a lot of, deep, dark family secrets that nobody wants to talk about, that nobody ever did address, and things unfortunately happen. And it's so much more common than we want to think that it is, unfortunately. And so it was because some of these people were friends of my parents. It was just something that you were ashamed of yourself. You thought it was your fault that these things were happening because these were people that your parents had invited into their home as friends. And thereby, if this is happening, it must be,
Yes.
because you're little, for goodness sakes, you don't know any different. And so as I got older and with the continuing alcoholism in the household, and I had a lot of responsibility, which I really didn't mind because I was really socially awkward and painfully shy. So I liked, having to go home and look after my siblings and clean the house and make meals. It was an escape because I didn't have those social skills. I had an awesome family. I don't want to make it sound like my parents, weren't good people because, they didn't know and I didn't know that they didn't know some of the things that were happening. Right. But you're a kid. And so my way of coping with all of this was the one thing I felt like I could control in my life was what I was eating or wasn't eating, that nobody could make me, even if I sat at that table and ate that meal, I could purge it and get rid of it, or I could do these ridiculous amounts of exercise. And it was an outlet to escape a pain that was so deep that you didn't know what else to do. And, the crazy thing is at that age, I couldn't have told you why I was doing what I was doing. I truly thought I was ridiculously overweight and grotesque, and that, that's the only thing that would make me a lovable person. It was to lose that weight and be, ridiculously thin. Stupid thing is my body type doesn't allow me to be exceptionally thin. I'm not actually very small boned. The whole time was crazy, but I was just so blessed to have that doctor call me out and inform my parents of what was going on. And, I can't say that everything just stopped when I went home. That's when I became bulimic, right? Because now my parents knew what was going on. But all of these issues still hadn't been sorted out and delved into. And, there hadn't been any counseling or anything like that to correct why I was in that situation in the first place. But so I just became a little bit sneakier. But in the back of my mind was always that wording from the doctor that I may have messed up my body enough that I might never be able to have kids. And for me, that was my call to change how I was handling that stress. So I was like one of the lucky ones. I still to this day.
I was going to ask you, did you get any sense of relief when the doctor outed you? Okay.
There was, yes. Yes, because I felt like somebody...
So you literally knew what you were doing then. You just didn't know to what degree. Is that fair to say?
I knew what I was doing. I didn't understand at that age
I understand
why I was doing it. And that, I have to say, I was, probably close to 35 before I sorted through that emotional baggage enough to take ownership for everything, to say to myself, none of that was my fault. I am not to blame. Those were issues that were far out of my control, and there was nothing I could have done to stop it. And I'm okay as who I am, and it's made me a stronger person. And that's where I chose to live and to where I wanted to go forward. And you can make darn sure that I did everything in my power to protect my kids from those things, probably to an extreme. It's like I wanted my daughter to be a very strong, empowered woman, and she's a little scary
You did
sometimes.
it.
But, I made sure that they understood that their bodies were their bodies, and that nobody, no matter what, and it's just, it was a lot, but
Was it a
I'm truly
was
blessed.
it a constant
And
purging then at that age between 14 and
go
16?
ahead.
Were you literally throwing up your meals or just hiding food and not eating it? What were you like? Take me through a day. Like, what would it be like? Like, what is it just, did it get easy for you to do? Wow.
Oh, incredibly easy. And to the point where just thinking about food was enough to make you want to throw up. But a few pieces of lettuce would be like, oh my gosh, I've eaten too
Yeah.
much, because your stomach shrinks and it gets so irritated, and sort of I guess gastritis would be a good way to describe it. But I went from between 14 and 16, just, the other thing you don't think about with bulimia, especially with the constant vomiting, is that I went from not having a single cavity and amazing teeth to having six cavities,
Yeah.
because the acids from vomiting, they erode the teeth. And so it's just all these different things. But that nutritional deficit, and where that left me, I mean, I was so constipated that sometimes it would be 9 days
Holy cow.
before I could have a bowel movement. And yeah, that in itself was, it's
Yeah.
toxic to yourself when you can't, you know, and so it was very, I was really lucky to start a family young and to not
Yeah.
have any issues getting pregnant, because they were sort
Oh,
of
okay.
my corrector, because I realized I
Right.
had to do better for them. But, in a typical day, by the time I was about 14, then that was my go-to, was everything was basically more calories to chew it and digest it than it was to provide food as fuel to the body, as
Okay.
energy and calorically. And and you learn to do that really well, because you can look like you're eating an awful lot of food that's actually a
And
whole
you're
lot
burning it
of
off.
not much. And the muscle wasting, yeah, and the muscle wasting that happens with it, makes you a bit more doughy, right? Because if you're not getting proteins and healthy
Yeah.
fats, then your body cannibalizes its own muscle, and it makes you exhausted all the time. And, so you see that loose sort of tissue as being more body fat. And the whole thing, they do
Yeah.
call it body dysmorphic disorder, and it happens with men as well. There are a lot of men that struggle with it as well, and it's generally, there's, as I said, something back in the past that was just too much to cope with. It's sort of another version
Yeah.
of people that cut themselves to release pain. They don't cut themselves because they want to have scars and that they want to hurt themselves, but it releases a pain that they cannot find any other outlet for, no other healthy outlet. And so, yeah, that's what I would do, is just, an apple, salad, celery. Celery is a big one,
Yeah.
because celery, there's so much fiber in it, and it's mostly just water. But, just avoided anything else that had any, no junk food, obviously, and very, very little protein. And so that's what I would do, is, eat those foods initially
Did
just to try and lose weight, to be basically just vegan, but super poorly. And then once I was caught out, then you go to the bulimic. It's like, okay, well, you can make me sit down at the table, and you can use your eagle eyes and not let me leave the table until I'm finished what you've put in front of me. But then I can go up to the bathroom and get rid of all of that before it's had a chance to, you know, add any calories to me, kind of thing, just to get that control back, because as I said, none of the other issues at that point
were
had
any of
been
your high
resolved and
school
dealt
friends
with.
at the time or school friends, were they aware? Did they know what was going on?
I did have one close friend, um,
Wow.
and she was dealing with the same thing. And yeah, yeah. And I was definitely a loner in high school. I was not, looking to win any popularity contests. I was just, as I said, really, really socially awkward and incredibly painfully shy. And to be
Yeah.
where I am
It's
nowadays doing the things
come a
that I
long
do,
way.
I'm just like, wow, that's not how I grew up. But, it all just, yeah, you
Wow.
tend to just try and stay under the radar when
So when
you're
did
having those kinds of problems. You're
so
not
when did
trying
the
to
recovery
pay
start
attention
then?
to
This doctor's
yourself.
called you out, you move on to bulimia, and you said with your kids coming, when you get married and you start to have your children, then you realize it hits you. But in that phase in between, were you starting to get better? Were you looking for ways to heal yourself?
I would say that by the time I was 19 or 20, my husband and I got married young. It was the day before my 19th birthday, and got really lucky. It'll
Congratulations.
be 38 years this year that we've been married. And I know I just gave away my age if anybody can do the math, it truly, he was the best thing that could have happened to me because he was the first
Yeah.
person that I could share with entirely and not be afraid that he was going to stop loving me or think that I was a shameful human being because things that had happened. And so when we started our family, I was 21 when our son was born and 22 when our daughter was born. And it was just a matter of, okay, I have to do better by these guys. And in doing better for them, was able to do better for myself. And managed to keep things on a really, really even keel until I would say, what was it in, we had a business failure and ended up having to sort of start over basically. And during that period of extreme stress, I noticed that I was sort of starting back into my old patterns. And again, it was okay, I'm doing this because this is the only area of my life that it feels like I have control over. So it was like, okay, full stop, smarten up. You can't serve your family. You can't dig your way out of this if you do what you did to yourself before. So it was a really easy switch for me to get back on track. And then again, when I was around 40, there were a few other things. I ended up having a stalker, and that just, it dredged up everything that I thought I'd dealt with as a child and just blew up like this atomic bomb. And I was just like, and so at that point, I probably lost
Wow.
30 to 40
Yeah.
pounds before I caught myself.
Yeah.
And people were asking, like, are you sick? Like, and, you know, what's going on? And then I, managed to gather myself back together again. And so I think that's the really important thing for people to understand with that condition is you get remissions and that can be for the rest of your life, but if you have some massive trigger or stressor, it's really, really easy to fall back into those patterns. It's very common for
Yeah.
people.
Okay, I
It's kind
understand
of
that. Yeah.
like an obsessive compulsive disorder. In fact, myself, I would call it that because I think a lot of people do have at least some OCD, and it's not disruptive unless it stops you from, getting out to work and doing your job and things like that.
And with
But I
all that
it's
happened in
sadly
your
it's
life
more
too, I think
common
there
than we
was
realize.
the amount of people I've talked to, the amount of interviews I've done. It seems to me you had one other choice, and that was to join in and be the alcoholic. And I think it's crossroads in a lot of young people's lives to make that decision to stay on the right track, or to find the right track for themselves, right? And I don't think we really look at it
Yeah.
enough to be analytical of it, to make those decisions. And you grew up in the same era that I grew up, and it was a different world back then. It was a totally different world. And I'm glad. I'm like you. I think we were probably overprotective with our kids too, but that's just the way it is. That's society, and we kind of do that. Yeah, and I think too when I did read your piece and you were talking about this, I think the other part that I really wanted to focus on for the second half of this interview is just the recovery and what you've gone on and did, and how you've taken that situation that you were in, like you said earlier, and changed that all around. You're so much about, we've just finished, you and I just finished a series of videos on fiber and the importance of it in your body and diet and nutrition. And I'm a big exercise guy, you know what I mean? And it's just, you find those things. And I think that's really, really cool. My point back to the alcoholism, my dad was somewhat of an enjoy to drink. And I threw myself probably in one form or another into sports. Like, I just wouldn't come home from school. I would stay at school till whatever team was playing I could play on, I played on. Yeah. And that was my way of coping with it and to get away from it, rather than going out and partying all the time, which I'm now going to lie about, because I did go out and party a few times, that's for sure, we all do. But I just think it's kind of one of those things where we don't, like you said, we're kind of afraid to talk about it at that age, and you just deal with it the best you can. And it's a lonely battle sometimes, isn't it? That's for sure. But
yeah,
I think society's changing.
It is. I think they are as well. And I think that's a really positive thing. I always call it the pendulum swing. We go from one extreme where nobody's talking about something, and then we go to the opposite where everybody is, and then eventually we come back to some sort of middle road, but both sides have learned. And that's a huge thing. It's
for sure
having those outlets. And fortunately, you did the same thing I did, is that you found other outlets over the years. And having the responsibility of younger siblings,
it kind of puts things in perspective.
That was a good thing for me.
When my father was in the hospital for about a year and a half, and when you're the oldest at that time, I think I was 13, 14, you had to get everything done so mom could go to the hospital at night. And it teaches you responsibility in a different perspective that you're not ready for at a young age. But I was fine with it. The other aspect of this that we didn't touch on, we should just spend a minute on, is the mental health aspect. When you're dealing with, when I'm dealing with stuff and you're dealing with stuff, hit my mic there, sorry folks. But that's part of it too, isn't it? Like you said, you're kind of hiding it, and that's kind of a mental health issue, is it not?
Oh, it entirely is, because the shame is enormous. Because even though you're feeling that what you're doing is absolutely necessary, you know enough to hide it, and that's the shame aspect of it. And it does affect you. It's, there is isolation and depression that goes along with it, a lot of anxiety. Trying to keep it covered up, trying to not let other people know, because on a level, you know that what you're doing isn't right. And you know that not everybody else is doing that. But you're literally, at least for me, you're just trying to find a way to survive and get through something that you can't otherwise process. And, the exercise, for me, it was very important. I grew up in a neighborhood of 13 boys. And so my dad would put money on me for arm wrestling. And it was very important for me to be able to physically defend myself. I remember some poor guy coming up in high school behind me at my locker, and he poked me in the rib, and I turned around and I punched him right in the face because I was so reactive to people touching me if I wasn't, and his poor face, I felt terrible. And I don't know if he ever got over that. He never talked to me again. So, but it's, there are so many dark spaces in our brain and so many things that we just try and sequester away. And that really blew my mind when I ended up with that stalker when I was 40, because I'm like, oh yeah, I've dealt with all this stuff. I'm golden. I am, I'm past all of that. And it just opened a Pandora's box like never before. And so yeah, it's we often think we have found ways to
Nope.
deal with things. And then you find out that, you know what, maybe it's still down there. And I've never gone for any formal counseling. I mean, I've just, tried nutraceutically and diet wise. That was my thing, is to embrace, a path that
Is that your
supports good
marathon?
health and to help other people do that same thing.
Yeah,
And
like I mean,
that's
like running is my way of
my
my outlet,
marathon.
getting
Yeah,
out and
that's
just
my
enjoying the
marathon.
run. And it seems to me your
Yes.
outlet is educating yourself on as many different aspects as you can.
Yeah.
Would that make sense about your health, right? Oh, for sure. Yeah, I get that.
To help other people,
Right.
yeah, because and I think that distracts me from me, right? If I can become a solution finder for somebody else, then to this day, I know it still
Right.
helps me
Yeah,
not have to think about my problems, and it just, is that healthy? Maybe not, but
but
I
yeah,
do I do eat properly now, and I know when I have to catch myself, and I know when those triggers build up. I'm not afraid to
yeah,
reach out for help anymore because I have a circle that I trust and that knows me and loves me and trusts me. So it's much easier to manage. But yeah, that facet of our
right.
personality, that is kind of part of who we are, and it will always exist. You can't just chop it off and throw it away like the end of a carrot. It is part of, and it reminds me of our humanity. It makes us more human, and it gives us power to know how far we've come. And that's what lights me up. That's what I just, to educate and empower other people is just to me, it's the most valuable gift. And I
One of
feel
the big
so
words that
blessed
you use a lot
to work
when
with other people and
in
help them
in
that
your
way.
ratings for your articles and with our videos that we do as well is balance. You're big on balance and all the way across, all the way through your life. And I think that's probably, doing
Right.
this interview with you and sort of going a little bit deeper than we usually do. But that seems to be what keeps it all going for you, isn't it? Keep finding that balance. And it makes sense now why you're such a strong advocate for helping people
Yeah.
find their own balance really in their lives, which is critical.
Yeah. It really, truly is. And I mean, we own a scale. I don't step on a scale.
You're gonna laugh.
I just, that's
I
a
do.
dark spot.
I'm on the
for me.
scale. I'm the
And if I
guy. I'm
start
the guy that
do
goes to
that-
the scale. I'm like, oh my god, look at that. I'm 4 pounds over my running weight. You know.
Yeah. Right.
It's a lot of weight.
And I mean, when
Yeah,
you're an
that's-
athlete like that,
Well, who
that
are we
affects
kidding?
your performance.
I'm
that
57
way.
years
It
old. The
is.
prime's long
It
gone.
is. It's
I
not
finally,
much
it
to
took me
carry.
a long time to realize it's okay to have a beer. I'm done for the day, right? To walk away. I remember, actually, it's a great story because I remember
Yeah.
when I had my heart issues a few years
That's
back, and I
right.
visited my cardiac guy, and he said to me, I did blow up the treadmill. I had an unbelievable thing, and he goes, "You know, it's okay to relax once in a while, just to have a piece of pizza or have a cold beer, right?" So, and I needed to hear that. I'm that guy, right? It's like, oh, I can, okay. So, right, he pegged me. He knew because I get obsessed, right? I want to just keep going, and that's not healthy.
Yeah.
But you like, yeah, it is. It's a natural high.
It's an endorphin thing, right? There's an actual chemical endorphin. Same when people do the cutting, there's an endorphin chemical rush that temporarily eliminates that pain that's tormenting you. And then unfortunately, it comes right back again. So, regardless of what your
for sure.
outlet is, it's still going to be there when And for me, I have learned that the weight that you feel physically healthiest with isn't
Yeah.
necessarily the weight
Yeah.
that we want to be at. Okay, so when you feel your most vibrant and
Yeah.
energetic, might not be that silhouette figure that you're looking for, and it's hard. It's very damning to see, all of these models and things like that, because girls grow up with this image that that's what their body is supposed to look like. But it's not a very large sector of the population that's that tall and has that bone structure. And, it's just recognizing the power of our bodies, recognizing that blessing that you're here, you're alive, you have this life, um, and then
Yeah.
finding your passion and really getting into that, just living in that place, that space, because I feel everybody has a distinct purpose. And that when we find what that purpose is, and that's our area to shine. And so we can't judge anybody else. The worst thing we can do is judge other people, because if you're, feeling well and healthy, your body is able to do all of the things that you need to do in a day and more, you know, um, then it doesn't necessarily matter what your package looks like. It's just as long as your body is performing everything that it needs to do. And when we look at nourishing that body, that person, so that they can accomplish those things, then that's huge. But we just have to get away from those images of what we perceive as perfection and realize that
It's
we're
unfortunate,
probably
and a lot of
already
it,
perfect,
99% of it is
and
media driven,
just
and it's
embracing that.
sad. There's no other way to describe it. And it's hard when it's hard enough to be a kid
It
these
is.
days. I can't imagine the pressures when like you said, when you're bombarded with figures like that. It's not good. It's not going to end well. It's not going to end well, folks. We haven't really given yourself a plug. I know that we mentioned over apothecary, but this is where what I was sort of leading to is you've come through all this. You have your own business too on the side. Talk a bit about that and what you do, because there's people that will listen to this podcast and they don't know that you and I hang out and make videos and write articles. So tell us about
Right. Okay. Well, I am a natural nutritional clinical practitioner, and I've been in the health food field for 30 years now. That all started because my children had a lot of health issues when they were little, and much of that stems from being pregnant at an age that was quite young and not very long after my recovery of the anorexia and bulimia, where my nutritional status wasn't what it should be to be having a fetus developing and giving them all of the nutrients that their bodies need to thrive, to go forward. And so huge learning curve. But as I worked with my kids to try and get them healthy, and I recognized the power of food and a few supplements and that type of thing, and seeing the absolute amazing change in their health, that was when I began to study all sorts of natural health modalities. And basically 10 years in a grassroots health food store, and then working in integrative pharmacies. And, of course, the last 5 years I've been at Mike's. And that's because I realized we needed to establish a bridge between both modalities, the allopathic and the complementary therapies. But that whole, the years of studying and the different courses and programs and certifications and all of that, it never stops, because the more you learn, the more you realize you don't know. And to me, that's what drives me, right? It's to me very exciting to keep learning things. And I focus on digestive health with people, because I certainly know firsthand what it is to restore your digestive system. And for my children, that was, the area we had to focus on to get their health back. Family history wise, there's obviously a large component of genetic digestive health problems. I lost my sister to colon cancer 8.5 years ago, just lost my dad last July to a bowel obstruction. And looking after our digestive health and understanding how that affects every other part of your body in order for you to be truly healthy, because 80% of your immune system's in your gut. So if you have intolerances or sensitivities or outright allergies and you're not addressing those, then the long-term effects of that to your overall health is definitely going to negatively impact your longevity and your quality of life. And these are things that, with the right tools, with the right knowledge, and when I do consultations with people, we can get, no pun intended, to the bottom of what's going on with their digestive health, whether it's acid reflux, whether it's constipation, diarrhea, irritable bowel, GERD, you name it. Anything that, involves the in and out processes of the body, we have to be paying attention to that, because the body sends us so many amazing signs and symptoms, and those are our opportunities to make changes. But we have to understand them. That's where education comes in. And then wanting that responsibility and being empowered with the tools to go ahead and do it. I think one of the things that makes me most uncomfortable is when somebody comes back and thanks me and they're like, you changed my life. You gave me my life back. And I was like, I didn't write the books that I read. I didn't make the supplements. All I did was help you put your puzzle pieces back together, because we're all a puzzle and we're all a perfectly beautiful puzzle, but everybody's pieces are in different places. And it's just a matter of helping people understand themselves, look at their lifestyle, look at their nutrition intake, and then just bringing all those pieces together for them. So and that's what I love to do, and
Do you
I'm
a website
blessed.
or
I really
something
am,
we can give out to the
because
folks, or an
I
email
love it.
address,
It
or
lights me
how
up.
can I get a hold of you? I guess that's what I'm asking.
Okay. Yes, definitely. I have a website as well, and my email is barb@healthywellandwise.ca. So that's usually the easiest way for people to get a hold of me. I do have a Facebook page as well, and the website, so
Or
I can get you
stop by
those
Dover
links for
Apothecary, I
that.
guess, too.
And
And
it's
visit you there. Yeah,
sure.
it's a journey. I
Yeah,
really
awesome.
appreciate you taking the time today to sit down with me and have
Yep.
this conversation. I know it's not an easy one, but I think the difference it can make in people's lives is truly, you know a lot of people, the impact of people just hearing your story. Let's hope it helps a few people out there maybe make some different decisions or get in touch with someone that can help them, or like this, maybe they had a situation in their life, maybe it'll open that door so they know that they're not alone, that there's other folks out there that they can talk to as well. All right. Well, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and more
Fair
than
enough. Well,
anything this year is that's what we have to help
all right.
people
Thanks for doing
understand
this, Barb.
is
Have a
they're
great
not
day.
alone. They're
And we'll
just
talk
not.
soon. Okay. Okay. So
Okay, thanks so much, Dave. It's been a pleasure.